The hotel was nearly empty when I checked in. It was off-season, midweek, and the place felt like it was holding its breath. Quiet halls, dim lighting, front desk clerk barely out of his teens and more interested in his phone than handing me my key card. He said I had the floor to myself. Only booking up there tonight, he added with a shrug. Room 308. End of the hall, view of the parking lot and a field behind it. The room was fine, sterile, impersonal. Everything in taupe and beige. I dropped my bag, kicked off my shoes, and turned on the TV just for the background noise. It buzzed faintly with static between channels. I landed on some cooking show and let it drone on. Around 11:45 p.m., I shut off the lights. Outside, it was silent. No traffic, no voices, just the occasional hum of the vending machine near the elevators. I lay in bed, not quite tired, but resting. My phone buzzed once with a weather alert. Light fog moving in. I ignored it. Then the room phone rang. The old beige landline on the nightstand. Loud, sudden. I stared at it for a second before answering. Hello? Static. Then a voice. Did you hear that? I paused. Who is this? No response. Just the faint hiss of static. I could tell the call wasn't coming from outside the hotel. It had that soft, clipped quality of an internal connection. I checked the phone. No caller ID, just the blinking red in-use light. Before I could say anything else, the line clicked and went dead. I sat up listening. Nothing. The walls were thin, but I hadn't heard voices, movement, even a footstep since checking in. I got up and walked over to the peephole. The hallway was empty, carpeted, dimly lit, silent. A fire exit sign buzzed softly at the far end. Curious, I picked up the phone again and dialed the front desk. The same young guy answered. Front desk, this is Mark. Hey, I said, trying to keep my voice calm. I just got a call, from a room line, I think. It said something about hearing something. Can you check if someone's in the room next to me? A pause. You're in 308, right? Yeah. More silence. Then, there's nobody booked in 307. That whole side's empty. I stayed quiet for a second, trying to process what he'd said. Are you sure? Mark sounded annoyed now. Yeah, I'm looking at the system. You're the only guest on that floor tonight. You sure it wasn't someone pranking you? I guess, I muttered. Yeah. Sorry. I hung up and stood there with the phone still in my hand. Something about that call didn't feel like a prank. There wasn't laughter or weird noises. Just that quiet, strained voice and one line. Did you hear that? The way it was said? It didn't sound like a joke, it sounded like fear. I walked over to the wall that bordered 307 and pressed my ear against it. Silence. Then, after a moment, just as I was about to pull away, I heard it. A muffled sound. Soft, rhythmic, like something sliding across the carpet. Then a thud. I pulled back fast. My heartbeat was in my throat now. I stepped into the hallway barefoot, crossed the distance to the door marked 307, and listened. Inside, something was moving. I leaned in closer, trying to make sense of the sound. It wasn't footsteps. It was slower than that, uneven, like something dragging or crawling. Then a faint creak, like a mattress shifting under weight. I knocked once, quietly. No answer. I waited another 10 seconds before backing away. Maybe it was a cleaning closet, maybe Mark had made a mistake, but as I turned to head back to my room, I heard the lock on 307 click. Not open, just click, like someone had gently turned the knob from the inside. I turned around. The door was still shut, but now I was sure. Someone was in there. Watching through the peephole, maybe. Waiting. I didn't knock again. I just went back to 308, locked the door behind me and pushed the armchair in front of it. This whole thing was wrong. Someone was in that room. Either Mark was lying or didn't know. And if they were calling me at midnight, whispering things through the wall, They didn't want to be alone. I sat awake in bed for over an hour, the glow from the hallway light slipping through the crack beneath the door. I kept waiting for more sounds from next door, but it was dead quiet again. Eerily so. Like whoever was in there knew I was listening and had stopped moving on purpose. At 2:03 a.m., the room phone rang again. I jumped, stared at it, heart hammering. The same line, no caller ID, just that blinking red light. I picked it up slowly, brought it to my ear. Breathing, shallow, controlled. Then a whisper. "Don't open your door." I froze. "Who is this?" I said. "What's going on?" No reply, just a faint rustling sound, like the receiver on the other end was being slowly set down. The line didn't disconnect. It stayed active with that faint hum of silence. I held the phone for another minute before hanging up. Then the knocking started. Not at my door. From the inside of the wall. The shared wall between 308 and 307. The knocking was slow, deliberate, not like fists, more like knuckles, barely enough to rattle the drywall but steady. One knock every few seconds, always in the same spot. I stepped closer to the wall and pressed my palm against it. The knocks didn't stop. They seemed patient, almost like they were waiting for acknowledgement. I whispered, "Who are you?" The knocking stopped. For a full minute, there was nothing. No sound from the wall, no hum from the AC, just stillness. Then, softly, a new sound emerged. Scratching. Long, slow drags along the inside of the wall, moving upward. The kind of sound that made my skin crawl because it didn't make sense. It was too steady, too calm. I stepped back from the wall, and the scratching stopped instantly. The room phone lit up again, but this time it didn't ring, just lit up. The red light blinked slowly like it was waiting for me to answer. I didn't. I unplugged the phone. The blinking light died. I stood there trying to convince myself to grab my bag and just leave, but part of me didn't want to open that door. Whatever was happening here, it felt like I was being lured. I couldn't explain it, but I knew, deep down, the safest thing I could do was stay inside my room. Around 3:30 a.m., and I must have dozed off in the chair, I woke up to a soft, distant sound, footsteps, out in the hallway, slow, barefoot. They stopped right in front of my door. I held my breath. Then, a knock. This time not from the wall, from the hallway side. 3 soft taps. I stayed still. I didn't make a sound. Something slipped under the door. I waited a full minute before moving. Then I got up, crouched low, and picked up what had been slid into the room. A hotel receipt, folded in half. Room 307. The name field was blank. But the checkout date? I stared at the receipt, hands trembling. Room 307. Checkout, tomorrow. But no name, no rate, just the timestamp and a signature line. Blank. I flipped it over. On the back, written in pencil, were 4 words. Don't let them in. By dawn, I'd moved the chair, grabbed my bag, and left the key card on the dresser. I opened the door slowly, expecting to see someone, anyone, in the hallway. But it was empty. No footprints on the carpet. No signs of movement. The only sound was the buzzing light above the elevator. I went straight to the front desk. Mark was still there, sipping from a giant thermos like he hadn't slept. When I told him what had happened, his face shifted from sleepy to alert in an instant. "There's no room 307, he said. I blinked. What? Mark pulled up the booking system. The rooms on my floor skipped from 306 to 308. We had a 307, but it's been out of use for years. Mold or something. They sealed it up. No one stays in there. I didn't argue. I just walked out, got in my car, and drove. That night, as I was unpacking at home, my phone buzzed. Unknown number. One new voicemail. I played it. A whisper, soft and close. You should come back. I needed a place to stay for 3 nights while my apartment was being fumigated. Nothing fancy, just something clean with Wi-Fi and a door that locked. I found a listing for a private room in a minimalist smart home, about 30 minutes from the city. The host had all 5-star reviews and mentioned that the house had enhanced security features, including visible cameras for peace of mind. I didn't love the idea of being recorded, but the cameras were all listed as being in common areas only: the living room, front door, and kitchen. The bedroom, according to the listing, was private. Sounded like a fair trade-off. Besides, the price was right, and I only needed a bed and a roof for a few nights. The host, a guy named Greg, wasn't home when I arrived. He'd left a key in a lockbox with a code texted to me an hour before check-in. The house was spotless. Weirdly spotless. Everything was white, beige, or gray. No decor. No personal touches. It didn't feel like someone lived there. It felt staged. Inside the bedroom, things were bare but functional. Bed, small desk, lamp, charging dock. But what caught my attention right away was the camera mounted in the corner of the hallway ceiling, just outside my door. Its little green LED was blinking steadily. The blinking camera outside my door made me uncomfortable, but I reminded myself it was technically in the hallway, not in the room. I double-checked every corner just to be safe. Nothing on the ceiling, no small domes or pinholes in the walls. The host had even left a laminated sheet on the desk that read, "This is a no-camera guest room. Your privacy is respected." Still, the room had this sterile, too quiet feeling. I unpacked my bag and tried to settle in. That night I ordered delivery and watched something on my laptop. The house was completely silent. No footsteps, no neighbors, no sound of a fridge humming. Just the occasional creak, like the place was stretching. Around 1 a.m., I got up to grab a snack from the kitchen. As I opened the bedroom door, I glanced up at the camera again. It was still blinking, but this time the lens was angled differently. Before, it pointed toward the front door. Now it was angled slightly, just slightly toward my room. When I got back with a granola bar, I shut my bedroom door and locked it. Then I shoved a chair against it. It felt dumb, overly paranoid. But the camera, it hadn't moved when I was looking at it. It moved while I was inside. The next morning, I checked the camera again. It was back to its original position, pointed at the front door, like nothing had changed. Maybe it was a motorized camera that automatically swept the hallway. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling that it had reacted to me. While brushing my teeth, I noticed something else odd. The mirror in the guest bathroom wasn't flush with the wall. It stuck out slightly, like it had been installed hastily. Curious, I ran my fingers along the edges. On the bottom right corner, I felt a faint click as if something shifted under the pressure. The mirror tilted just enough for me to see a wire behind it. Thick, black, coiled. There was no label, no obvious lens, but it was enough. I took a picture with my phone and zoomed in. Right in the center of the mirror, hidden in the pattern of oxidation, was a tiny hole, too small to notice unless you were looking for it. But once you saw it, you couldn't unsee it. I emailed Greg with a polite message. "Hey, just checking. Any cameras in the bathroom or guest room? Found something odd with the mirror. Just want to make sure everything's cool." No reply. By noon, still no response from Greg. I decided to do a more thorough search of the room. I turned off the lights and scanned with my phone camera, aiming for the telltale infrared glint you sometimes catch from hidden lenses. I didn't see anything at first, until I got to the lamp on the nightstand. At the base of the lamp, tucked just beneath the metal ring where the cord met the socket, was a faint red glimmer. Barely visible. I bent down, lifted the lamp, and found a tiny black lens embedded in the base, angled upward, toward the bed. I hadn't noticed it when I arrived. It was seamless. Suddenly I felt watched. Not in the cliché paranoid way, actually watched. That thing had been there all night, maybe longer. I yanked the cord from the wall and carried the lamp outside into the trash bin, slamming the lid shut harder than necessary. Then I went back inside and sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the blank walls. My phone buzzed. New message from Greg. "Please do not tamper with the equipment. You agreed to the terms. Leaving early forfeits your refund. I hadn't agreed to anything about in-room surveillance, not even close. I went back and checked the listing. There was a section about advanced smart features, but it specifically stated no cameras in bedrooms or bathrooms. Greg's message felt like a veiled threat, more concerned about his setup than my comfort. That's when I noticed something else. The listing was gone. Not just unlisted, deleted. No trace, no reviews, no profile, nothing. I started packing. I didn't care about the refund. I just wanted out. But when I reached for the doorknob, I froze. The deadbolt was still locked, but the handle jiggled slightly when I pulled it, like there was resistance from the other side. I waited, pressing my ear to the door. Silence. Then, a soft creak on the floorboards outside. Someone was standing there. I backed away slowly and grabbed my phone, ready to call the cops, but I stopped myself. I had no idea where Greg was. Was he in the house, watching through some other hidden lens? If I called now and said I'd found cameras, what would happen in the 10 minutes before anyone got there? Then I remembered something. On the laminated welcome sheet, there had been a Wi-Fi network name and password. The network was still up. I connected and ran a quick scan. One connected device popped up with the name, Bedroom Cam 01. There was no mention of that anywhere in the rental agreement. I used a basic IP camera viewer app I had on my phone, something I'd downloaded ages ago to monitor my own security cams. When I typed in the device's IP, it asked for a password. I tried admin. It worked. What popped up was a live feed of me, standing in the middle of the room. From above. The angle was unfamiliar. Not from the lamp, not from the bathroom mirror. This was overhead. I looked up, heart racing. Nothing on the ceiling but the smoke detector. I climbed onto the desk, pulled the detector down, and there it was, gutted inside, with a camera mounted deep in the housing. The blinking LED had been disabled. It looked like a normal safety device unless you tore it open. I yanked it out and smashed it against the floor. No subtlety left. Then I looked back at the feed on my phone. Still active. Another feed had taken its place. Now the angle was from behind me, as if coming from the wall. I turned around in a panic and noticed for the first time the tiniest black dot drilled into the side of the power outlet. Flawless. Like it had always been there. There were more. I was sure of it now. I hadn't found the camera. I'd found one of many. I ripped the phone charger from the wall and stared at the outlet. There was no way to tell how deep the camera was or if it was even transmitting anymore. For all I knew, everything I'd done since I got here had been recorded. Changing clothes, sleeping, everything. I didn't know if Greg was watching live or reviewing it later, but he was watching. That much was clear. I left the room, bag half zipped, adrenaline pushing me down the hallway. The camera by the front door followed me. It didn't even try to hide it now. The lens rotated slowly, tracking my steps as I walked. I opened the front door, ready to bolt. But standing on the porch was Greg. He was thinner than I expected, older too. Late 40s maybe, with the kind of expression you see on someone trying to pretend they aren't angry. He smiled, but it didn't touch his eyes. "Heading out early?" he asked casually. I didn't respond. I just stepped past him and walked straight to my car. I kept the keys in my hand like a weapon, unlocked the door and got in. Greg stood on the porch watching me. He didn't follow. But as I pulled out of the driveway, I saw him raise a phone to his ear, not to call, to film. I drove until I saw streetlights and gas stations again, until I was back in the realm of normal life. Then I pulled into a parking lot and called the police. I gave them the address, told them everything, about the cameras, the fake smoke detector, the live feed. The dispatcher said they'd send someone to check it out. They took my statement but told me, calmly, that unless I had definitive proof of surveillance in private areas, it might be hard to prosecute. I uploaded the screenshots I had, the hidden device ID, the live feed, but part of me already knew it wouldn't be enough. When I drove back past the house the next day, it was empty. The curtains were drawn, the driveway was clear. A new sign hung from the porch post. For sale. No trespassing. Greg was gone. 2 weeks later, I got a call from a detective. They'd checked the property. No cameras were found. No signs of tampering. They chalked it up to a misunderstanding, a paranoid guest, maybe a misinterpreted smart system. The detective didn't say it, but I could hear it in his tone. He didn't believe me. I went home, tried to move on. But some nights, when I lie in bed and stare at the ceiling, I remember the angle of that first feed, the way it looked down at me, perfectly still, perfectly centered, like it wasn't just recording, like it had been waiting. I booked the cabin because I needed to disappear for a few days. A full-on burnout, a messy breakup, and a growing urge to throw my phone into a lake. The listing looked like a perfect escape. Secluded mountain cabin, no neighbors, quiet, optional Wi-Fi. The photos showed a stone fireplace, an old recliner, and a view of a dark lake behind fogged-up windows. 3 nights for less than $200. Too good to pass up. After confirming, the host sent me a short email with a strange warning. Please turn off all lights by 10 p.m. sharp. No exceptions. This is serious. I figured it was some weird mountain town thing. Maybe bears or power conservation. Hosts can be quirky. One once insisted I sleep with a specific blanket because it was blessed. Whatever. I dismissed it. I arrived just before dusk. The road up was narrow, and by the time I parked, fog was creeping in through the trees. The cabin was smaller than I expected, but had that cozy, almost antique look. Inside was dead quiet. No hum of electronics, no ticking clock, not even the groan of old floorboards. Just silence, thick and complete. Above the stone fireplace, a sign was nailed into the wood. Turn off all lights by 10 p.m. This is for your safety. This time it was in red ink, not bold, not threatening, just serious. I unpacked light, just a duffel bag with a few clothes, a paperback, and some snacks. There was no TV, no radio, not even a microwave. The cabin had a single overhead light in each room, a wood-burning stove, and a small lantern on the nightstand that looked battery-operated. There were no curtains, just thick wooden shutters on the inside of each window. I noticed that the shutters had metal latches to lock them shut from the inside. The clock above the kitchen sink was analog and ticked loudly, as if to remind me that time mattered here. At 9:30, I heated a can of soup on the stove and ate it straight from the pot, sitting on the floor next to the fireplace. The woods outside were now completely black. There was no moonlight, no distant traffic, just that kind of silence that presses in on you. By 9:58, I was brushing my teeth with a flashlight in hand. Something about the warning had stuck with me. Not fear exactly, but pressure, like I was being watched for obedience. At 10 on the dot, I turned off the lights. All of them. The cabin dropped into full darkness. I crawled under the thick quilt, stared up into nothing, and tried to sleep. But sleep didn't come easily, because not even 20 minutes later, I started to hear footsteps. Outside. Slow, heavy, deliberate footsteps crunching the gravel around the cabin, moving from one side to the next. I held my breath, listening. The footsteps weren't trying to be quiet. They weren't fast either, just slow, like someone circling. I sat up in bed, straining to hear through the thick walls. The shutters were all closed and latched, but now I understood why they existed. Whoever, or whatever was out there didn't care about being heard. They weren't sneaking. They were observing. I moved to the window closest to the bed and gently lifted one of the wooden latches. As slowly as I could, I cracked the shutter just a sliver and peered through. At first, I saw nothing but black. Then, as my eyes adjusted, I spotted something, just beyond the porch. A silhouette, still, facing the cabin. I couldn't make out a face or clothes. It was just a shape, and it wasn't moving. A dull metallic noise came from the back of the cabin. Then another. I froze. It sounded like the handle to the back door being tested. Jiggled once, then twice. Whoever it was knew the layout. Or there were more than one. My mouth went dry. I slowly closed the shutter and backed away from the window. No lights, no sound. I had no idea what they'd do if they thought I was awake. Then came the knock. One knock, from the front door. Not loud, not frantic, just patient. I didn't move, didn't breathe. My eyes were locked on the door, even though I couldn't see it clearly in the dark. A second knock came. Same rhythm, same pressure. Not someone asking for help, not someone desperate, just checking. I reached for my phone on the nightstand, but there was no signal. Not even one bar. I had downloaded some offline maps just in case, but there was no way to call anyone. No internet, no emergency contact. That isolation I had romanticized just hours ago now felt like a death sentence. Another noise came, this time from the side window near the kitchenette. A gentle tap against the glass. Tap, tap, like a fingernail. Then silence. I started to wonder if this was some twisted local tradition. A hazing, a prank. But something deep in my gut told me no. This wasn't performance. This was routine. Then I remembered the note in the email. This is serious. The sign above the fireplace. For your safety. And suddenly, I understood. The rule wasn't just a suggestion. It was a line in the sand. And tonight, something was checking if I had followed it. The knock stopped, but the silence felt heavier now. Charged, like the air before a storm. I stayed in bed, gripping the flashlight but refusing to turn it on. Minutes passed. Maybe more. Then, from somewhere near the living room, I heard a soft creak. Not from outside this time. From inside the cabin. I felt a cold rush crawl up my back. There was no way. Every door had been locked, every window shuttered. Unless I missed one. Unless they knew something I didn't. I slid off the bed as quietly as I could, bare feet pressing into the cold wood floor. I stayed low, moved toward the bedroom door, and listened. Nothing. No breathing. No movement. I cracked the door open just enough to peer down the hallway. Pitch black. The silence was so complete that I could hear my heartbeat echoing in my ears. I waited, frozen. Then, from the darkness, something moved. A shift of weight. A soft shuffle on the floorboards like someone stepping carefully just outside my line of sight. I pulled the door shut again, slowly, silently, until the latch clicked into place. Backed away. I didn't know what else to do. If someone was inside, I wasn't going to win a fight. My only edge was darkness. They didn't know where I was. Not exactly. I slid back toward the bed, still clutching the flashlight. That's when I heard it again, closer this time. A subtle scrape, like the heel of a boot dragging across the floor. Whoever was out there wasn't using a light. They were moving confidently, like they already knew the layout. And then, they stopped, right outside my door. I held my breath. No knock, no attempt to open it, just presence. I could feel it through the wood. A tension like whatever was out there was listening, waiting for something. Then, the most unnerving sound of the night. A whisper. It was too faint to catch the words, but it was unmistakably a voice, low and deliberate, pressed just against the other side of the door. It said something once. Paused. Then again. And then, nothing. The whisper stopped, but it didn't take the dread with it. I waited, paralyzed, listening for any sign of retreat. None came. No footsteps, no movement. Just a presence, like whoever was out there had decided to wait me out. Then something strange happened. The floor beneath me creaked, not from movement, but from vibration. Subtle at first, like a low hum was pulsing through the wooden beams. I pressed my palm against the floor. I could feel it. A thrum, almost like electricity. Except the cabin didn't have much electrical wiring. The lights were old, the appliances sparse. This wasn't from the cabin. It was coming from below it. I hadn't thought about it before, but the place was built on a raised foundation. There was a crawl space under the floorboards, and now, something down there was stirring. Slow, rhythmic dragging, like someone crawling beneath the cabin. At the same time, the door handle to my room turned. Not violently, not a forced entry, just a slow, deliberate twist. It stopped halfway, then returned to its original position. They weren't trying to come in. They were letting me know they could. I didn't sleep, I couldn't. I sat with my back to the wall until the gray light of dawn started to push against the shutters. Only then did I gather the nerve to open the door. The hallway was empty. The front door was still locked. No broken windows, no signs of forced entry. But there were prints on the floor. Bare feet. Damp. Streaked with dirt. They led from the front door to the living room, then vanished near the back wall. I checked under the couch, behind furniture. Nothing. I opened the hatch to the crawl space, but it was clean. Dry. Empty. I packed without showering, without breakfast. I just needed to leave. Before walking out, I glanced one last time at the sign over the fireplace. The red ink had faded overnight. I swear it had. Now it looked almost pink, like it was decades old. As I stepped outside, a second email came through on my phone. Barely 1 bar of service now that I was out in the open. It was from the host. "Thank you for respecting the rule. Most don't. Safe travels." There was no name, no contact info. I reported the listing to the rental site, but it was already gone, removed as if it had never existed. If these stories made you think twice about your next stay, you're not alone. Got your own creepy hotel or Airbnb experience? Drop it in the comments. I read every single one. And if you want more real-feeling horror that'll stay with you long after the video ends, subscribe, hit the bell so you don't miss what's coming next. Because sometimes, the scariest places are the ones you pay to sleep in.